Thank you all very much for coming. My name is Max Landry. I'm one of the 3 founders of Peppy and co-CEO. In terms of my job, I guess I mainly talk to our big clients and our partners, some of the big insurers that I'm sure you're aware of. Hello. It's very nice to see so many of you that we know here already today. A little bit about Peppy. We essentially provide support for people going through challenging life situations. I think we're probably most well known for our menopause service, but we also have a fertility service, a women's health service, which covers some of the big and challenging issues that women will go through, like endometriosis and PCOS, which affect actually quite large chunks of women and your workforces. We have a perinatal service, which supports pregnant women and new parents, and then we have a service for men who have appalling health outcomes once you start looking into it. I'm really genuinely delighted to be joined by Mandy.
As am I.
Mandy is, I would actually say, and I don't say this about everyone, but she's been a real pioneer in the construction industry. Mandy was the kind of driver of bringing menopause support and then a whole load of other women's and men's health supports to Mace, and through that to other members of the construction industry. She's a powerhouse, and thank you very much for coming here and sitting with me today. And I know she's the reason why you're all here. So Mandy, over to you.
That's slightly worrying. It can only get worse. So Director of Corporate Strategy, weird title, isn't it? Everybody uses the word strategy. I am on the main board. I'm also on development boards, innovation boards, all sorts of different boards. We love boards. I suppose my role here today is also just to share with you my experience, but that's predominantly because I'm also the board sponsor for Women at Mace. So firsthand, I've understood the issues that we have in our workforce, and to be honest, my own issues that I experienced, and for once I was in a position where I could do something about it, hopefully to prevent other people going through what I went through. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions, share my experience. I know Max is going to land me with certain questions which are not preordained, but anyway, and you'll take from it what you want, but I'm happy for anybody to ask me genuinely, and very openly will share with you what we've learned, what we thought was good, what we didn't necessarily think was good, and the challenges that we've faced. So you lead me.
Amazing, thank you. I guess I'll just, as a very high level, explain why we think this kind of approach to healthcare is important, which is essentially kind of trying to meet people where they are in their health journeys. And if you imagine you're a kind of 45-year-old guy, and I'm almost a 45-year-old guy, I'm a 42-year-old guy.
Look at you.
I know.
What if you're a 55-year-old woman?
That's good. But what's interesting about that exact thing is that, you know, so let's take a 42-year-old guy. 40% of men over 40 have low testosterone. So whatever needs that I may or may not have as a 42-year-old guy are different from, let's say, a 22-year-old woman with endometriosis, are different to a 51-year-old woman who's going through the menopause, are different to a trans man who is experiencing menopause symptoms. And I guess our general philosophy, and what I want to impart today, is that our approach to healthcare is around understanding that people are coming from these different places and then being able to provide something that's really appropriate to them for whatever their life stage is. And I think that, and we think that, that approach is how you really engage people and ultimately lead to better health outcomes, which is what we want to do. But I have to say, when I very first met you, and I think it's fair to say we had a bit of a meeting of minds on our first call, and I sort of did my pitch that I do to employers to Mandy, and you kind of opened up very quickly on the call and actually said, you know, some of these things you were talking about, Max, I actually experienced and had been challenging for you. And then when we started to talk about why this is a workplace issue, you basically sort of got it very quickly and said, this is not just a sort of well-being issue, this is a sort of strategic issue for an organisation.
Yeah, it is.
And could you just say it? Because I'd always been sort of talking maybe in well-being terms, and then you basically sort of slapped me on the wrist and said, no, it's a strategic issue.
It is. I mean, we touched on this. So my business is an international, global business, construction, consultancy, facilities management, developments. And I have 2 whys. Why did I introduce it? I have a personal experience as Mandy, and I have an employer perspective. The employer perspective is that in construction, no surprise to anybody here, there is an issue in trying to maintain, create, attract, it starts from the base up, a female pipeline. And it's a really big issue. It's a big issue not just because we want to be seen as one of those people who, for sake's sake, has gender equality, but because we genuinely believe in it. We're a purpose-led organisation. Inclusivity is at the heart of what we do. My ultimate client is society. I need to represent society. I need my teams to turn up to client meetings fairly represented. Ethnicity, gender. I can't have that without a pipeline. So this pipeline will go way beyond my working life, but it's got to start somewhere. I need to attract. And we all know how hot the employment market is, how expensive it is. So that employee value proposition, aside again from doing the right thing, is the important thing to do. And I know that you can have all the policies in the world, but how many of you read policies? And how many do you really adhere to policies? And how many of your staff really know what that means, how to behave in the environment to put that policy to life? It doesn't really cut it. So it was really about our senior women and our younger women coming into the business who don't just value money, but what were we saying about their future careers? How could they manage their careers? A woman isn't just faced with one, but I was talking to a lady out there, you're faced with so many touch points in your life, from fertility to pregnancy to being a parent to miscarriage to menopause to all these things. And today you're supposed to work. We want to work. We want to have equal senior positions. And you've probably got children as well. So it's a really difficult thing. And yes, as an employer, I have private healthcare. Of course we do. And there's the NHS. But there's something between the two. And that's where my experience comes in. So unfortunately, ultimately, the end of my story was a hysterectomy at 29 from acute endometriosis. And I literally went to GPs giving me ibuprofen and telling me to go to bed. And I was I had quite strong career aspirations, and going to bed for half your life isn't really the answer to most of these things. And, at the end of and one wonderful person told me to go to the library and to look it up. And I don't think anybody would believe me if my parent hadn't been in the room with me to actually say, that really was said to you. I mean, it's quite remarkable. So when I listened to my women at Mace, I wouldn't want anybody to go through I wouldn't want them to have a hysterectomy at 29 either. And the worst part, incredulously as I think about it, was what I did from my employer perspective. I actually left a very successful job and went part-time. Now, there's a reason and place for part-time work. Of course there is. I'm not saying it's lower than full-time. It certainly isn't. But 30 years ago, it was. I took a huge pay cut and put myself on a completely different level because I thought, this is like an illness. Everybody thinks it's a weakness. So I'll disguise my illness, and what I'll do is I'll go in a few days a week, and when I can't do those days, I'll go in other days. So nobody will actually know that I'm off ill. And I did that for about 2 years until I eventually had a hysterectomy. So, God forbid anybody goes through that today. And I would be furious. We certainly would never condone something like that. But the reality is today there's more at our fingertips, technology. We have more knowledge. We have more experience. So for me, it is a strategic issue because I want my people to be brilliant. I want them to come to work. I want them to bring their entirety of themselves to work and their issues, because it's my problem too. If they can't come to work and be productive, it's my problem. So we've found it a very warming experience. And why I say that is because it's opened up the conversation beyond policies. It's something evidential as an employer. This is what we're prepared to do. But at the same time, it's broken down those barriers. And we've found the strangest things happening. Maybe they're not strange, maybe they're just wonderful. We've had guys on the calls, our colleagues, talking about the wives, talking about the partners, saying, no, I don't know what to do. Oh, what HRT are you taking? Men actually calling me and saying, Mandy, what do you take? What vitamins do you take? What do you do about this? And it's fascinating how the conversation has opened up so that it's become so broad so quickly, is the point, the acceleration of it, that we have been able to kind of bypass some of the probably more tricky, difficult stories that people were quite rightly beginning to say, I'm not sure why Mace stands on this. So instead of going through all those rocky roads, we've kind of leapfrogged it. I'd say my position has been, I'm very pleased we've done it. I'm pleased we've had such good partners to it. But at the same time, I've had 2 women come to me and say, look, I'm being poached. I'm not leaving because you've been so good with me that I'm going to stay. Now, the recruitment fees, again, sorry to be strategic, but the recruitment fees for those 2 senior women alone cover the cost of this twice over. So I would be a fool to kind of walk away and think that hasn't really paid dividends, even if it's 5 or 6, but it's not. But the reality is it's been a great experience for us.
Amazing. Look, I mean, thank you for sharing your personal story, Mandy. I and I think probably everyone here really appreciates it. I mean, unfortunately, actually, I mean, I think everyone's aware that menopause has been sort of largely ignored, but less so now. But actually, still, diagnosis for endometriosis is still, I think, 7 years. So that's a problem that has not yet gone. I mean, we can do a lot to address that, but most people will still be having an experience not 100 miles away from your experience there. In terms of just sort of getting buy-in, I guess, in companies, and what were the kind of discussions you were having with your colleagues on the board to say these are important, we should be doing this? How did you turn it from, I guess, this was my personal experience, I know this is important, into this is strategic? Was everything around kind of retention, attrition, was that the focus, or was there something else?
It's a strange thing. It might be a stat just to construction, but we don't really suffer greatly from female attrition in the workforce. Strange enough, it's more male-orientated attrition. However, attraction is a different issue, and retention, so that you will stay long enough and not just leave the workplace completely. So it's not necessarily about moving around, and we have very good visible stats that we see all the time. So as a purpose-led organisation striving for equality, visible equality, you know, that we can prove and evidence, and that you'll see in our gender pay gap reports, because nobody likes the gender pay gap reports in construction. I mean, the reality is they always look appalling. So for us, it was that very much conversation about, look, we've got these stats, we can see where the problems are, we can see where the grades, we can see the age groups, we can see everything, what are we going to do about it? We know that the one bullet will not fix this. There is no one silver bullet. In fact, it's a huge array of different things, even to the extent, you know, I'm going into schools and talking to young women about going to construction and STEM and engineering. But the reality is there are lots of different things, and what we were seeing is that our intake, graduate level, it's about 50-50. But when you get senior, it really falls off. It's because women are suffering from issues or thinking they're not supported in the workplace, and maybe even determine, do you know what, I'm going to leave the workplace or I'll do something completely different. So we knew it was at a very senior level, and having engaged with them, and we have very close relationships with our staff, where they're outspoken, thank goodness. Then at the board level, for us, a private organisation, it was a very obvious answer, very quick response. We know we want gender equality. We need to do whatever it needs to do to achieve that. So it wasn't actually a very lengthy discussion. We're all very committed to it. So it was pretty quick. It was pretty concise.
I'm sure that's partly because you were the one saying let's do it.
No, but we
probably quite hard to say no to.
We're pretty open about these things, to be honest, at board level. And the reality is we had a lot of our senior women who telling us that this is what's happened to me and this is a problem. And we also, throughout this, 28 years we've all been together, we've got our senior women telling us, we know they've had fertility issues, we know some women have struggled to get pregnant, we know it's taken their focus off the work. We know these things are happening to us. We don't need stats to tell us. We know the people. We know their stories. So for us, it was just something that helped us. It was a tool, amongst other things. It's not one thing, but it's a tool. It's like golf clubs, isn't it? Depends where you are on the course, what you need to take out your bag.
Yeah, you're saying it's sort of a change in attitude. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that sort of idea of a change of attitude. I remember when we launched, just as an example, our menopause service, we launched it, I think, 3.5 years ago. And the first thing we said is, right, we better test this. Let's give it away for free. So we went into a closed Facebook group that had, I can't remember, 20,000 or 40,000 menopausal women in it. So it was like the target audience. And we sort of said, brilliant, we're going to give away 10 free appointments with Kathy Abernethy, who is the chair of the British Menopause Society. We sort of waited, and literally nothing happened. And like 3 days later, we were like, what the hell are we doing? Like, we can't give away our product for free. That same product, I won't name names, but like in the last month, 20 of the biggest organisations in the UK have launched exactly that same product. And I think that just sort of highlights this shift that we've gone through as a society. Like 3 years ago, you didn't even talk about menopause, even though we all know that half the world will go through this natural event. 3 years later, it becomes something that's very high on everyone's agenda. I'm being pointed out that it's 5 minutes to go, and I'm very conscious that we must take some time for questions. So I want to ask Mandy one more question, though, because it's such a pleasure for, I think, all of us having you here. What are the kind of quick wins that people should do? I think your experience of saying you saw something, you saw how it linked to your company's strategic objectives, you came in quite forcefully, I'm sure, and said, right, we're doing this. Not everyone is on the board of their company like you are. So what do you think are like 3 things that people can leave with today that just are tips for pushing forward in their own organizations? And you will all in this room represent very different types of company.
I'm, as I said at the start, I'm not really a policy person. That's my nature probably more than anything. My people aren't. We like policies, but they only have a place. I think for us it was more about our networks. Number one, our networks. We have very strong networks at Mace, and we really listen to them. We're all a representative of different networks around the board table. We have to be. We're daily involved. We have lots of sessions with externals, so we keep abreast of what's going on. I think the second thing is, I know it sounds dry, but it's the data. You need the data in your organisation. You need to understand where your risks are, your opportunities. You need to understand where the holes are popping up, because they won't necessarily be where you think they are. And you do need that golden thread of data. And I'd say the third thing as well for us has been about allowing people the freedom, the genuine sense of inclusivity that they can challenge, that they can speak up. Now that's a cultural thing and takes some time, but it's something very, very worthy of investment. And we've spent a long time trying to get people to speak up, and to be honest, they do, whether we like it or not now. I mean, it comes at a cost. But they're the biggest thing of all, the honesty in the environment, yeah.
Amazing, thank you. I'm aware we've got 3 minutes, but does anyone have any questions? We would love to hear your questions for either Mandy or myself.